This isn't the outcome I expected, but I've faced challenges before, and I will not back down. I need to speak with someone about my account. This isn't fair, and I won't accept it.
The denial came in a quiet voice. Monica Harris had dressed for approval. Navy blazer, low heels, hair pulled back neat and deliberate. The bank lobby smelled of lemon polish and cold marble. Behind her, a digital screen looped smiling families beneath the slogan, "Building Futures Together." Across the desk, Thomas Whitmore did not smile. He flipped through her file as if something sticky might fall out. Strong credit, profitable catering business, 10 years of spotless tax returns. Monica watched his eyes pause, not on the numbers but on her. "I'm afraid," he said smoothly, sliding the folder closed, "this loan would be a risk." Risk. The word thudded in her chest. "Could you clarify?" Monica asked, her voice steady though her palms burned. "My revenue has increased 20% each year." Whitmore folded his hands. "Some businesses," he said carefully, "struggle to scale in certain markets." There it was. Bloodless. A blade wrapped in silk. Behind the glass walls of the office, 2 junior bankers avoided looking at her. A security guard shifted his weight. Monica felt every eye and none at all. "So you're denying me," she said. Whitmore offered a thin smile. "We just don't believe you're the right fit for our portfolio." The words hung between them. Monica rose slowly, gathering her folder. "Then I suppose," she said softly, "we'll see who isn't the right fit." Whitmore didn't know, not yet, that someone upstairs had been listening. And by morning, his decision would cost more than a loan. Monica Harris adjusted the strap of her leather portfolio and stepped into Sterling National Bank as if stepping onto a stage. The marble floors reflected chandeliers that seemed too bright for 9 in the morning. A receptionist offered a polished smile. "Appointment. Monica Harris. 10 o'clock with Mr. Whitmore." The receptionist typed, glanced up briefly, then nodded. "He'll see you now." Thomas Whitmore's office was all glass and angles. He didn't stand when she entered. "Ms. Harris," he said, gesturing to the chair. "Let's take a look." Monica sat, placing her portfolio carefully on his desk. "Thank you for meeting with me. I've brought updated revenue projections." Whitmore flipped through the papers. "Catering business, correct?" "Yes. Harris Hospitality. We service corporate events, weddings, university contracts." She watched his pen hover beside a line item. "Our annual revenue crossed 1.2 million this year," Monica added. "We're seeking 250,000 to expand into a second kitchen." Whitmore leaned back. "Expansion can be ambitious." "My contracts are secured for 18 months, she replied evenly. "The demand is there." He nodded slowly. "Of course. And your collateral?" "My current facility and equipment are fully insured. I've included asset valuations." Whitmore's lips pressed thin. "Markets fluctuate. So do opportunities," Monica said. "Your credit score is strong," he admitted. "But scale introduces unpredictability." Monica folded her hands. "Could you specify the unpredictability?" Whitmore tapped the folder. "Certain neighborhoods present volatility." "My facility is in West Loop," she said. "One of the fastest growing districts in Chicago." He smiled faintly. "Yes, rapid change can create instability." Monica inhaled carefully. "Is there a metric in my file that suggests instability?" Whitmore closed the folder. "Ms. Harris," he said, voice smooth as varnish, "this isn't personal. We simply must evaluate overall risk profiles. And my profile suggests what? A higher exposure bracket. Based on composite indicators." She held his gaze. "Which are?" He hesitated, then shifted. "Industry saturation. Scaling strain. Liquidity pressures." "My liquidity ratio exceeds recommended thresholds," she replied. "Your own pre-screening email confirmed that." Whitmore's jaw tightened. Sometimes, he said, intuition supplements data. Monica felt something cold slide beneath her ribs. Intuition, she repeated. Yes. Experience. She leaned forward slightly. Is there anything in my performance history that justifies a denial? Whitmore clasped his hands. We don't believe this venture aligns with our portfolio strategy. That isn't an answer. It's the decision. Silence filled the office. Outside the glass, an assistant avoided looking in. So you're denying the loan, Monica said. I'm afraid so. Will I receive written documentation explaining why? You'll receive a standard notice. I would prefer specificity. Whitmore's smile thinned. Specificity isn't always constructive. Monica felt heat creep up her neck. Constructive for whom? For all parties. She rose slowly. Mr. Whitmore, she said, voice steady. I've built my business from one food truck and 2 folding tables. I employ 12 people. I've never missed a payment. I'm sure you've worked very hard. The words landed like a pat on the head. I have, she said quietly. And I expect to be evaluated on that. You were. No, she said. I wasn't. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across his face. Annoyance, maybe. Good day, Ms. Harris. She gathered her papers. At the door she paused. Out of curiosity, she asked, how many catering businesses have you approved loans for this year? Whitmore hesitated. Several. How many owned by black women? His expression hardened. That's irrelevant. It shouldn't be. She stepped into the hallway. Behind her, Whitmore exhaled sharply. Through the thin wall, she heard him mutter, unbelievable. In the lobby, the security guard watched her pass. Outside, Chicago wind cut against her skin. Monica stood on the sidewalk, breathing in exhaust and cold air. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. How'd it go? Her brother asked. She looked back at the towering glass building. They said I'm a risk. Beat of silence. Based on what? Intuition. Marcus let out a low whistle. You kidding me? I wish. You gonna fight it? Monica stared at her reflection in the bank's mirrored facade, small against steel and sky. Yes, she said softly. I am. Upstairs, in a corner office 3 floors above Whitmore's, Daniel Reed studied a spreadsheet glowing on his screen. Approval rates, demographic breakdowns, risk coding anomalies. He frowned. Why, he murmured to himself, does branch 14 deny twice as many minority applicants? His assistant knocked lightly. Your 11 o'clock is here. Reed didn't look up. Reschedule. He clicked open another file. Monica Harris. Denied. Risk. Elevated, subjective review. Reed's jaw tightened. Down on the sidewalk, Monica walked toward the train station, unaware that her name had just landed on the CEO's desk. And by tomorrow, someone would have to answer for it. Daniel Reed did not believe in coincidences. He believed in numbers. The spreadsheet glowed against the dim light of his office, long columns of approval rates segmented by branch, income bracket, industry, and geography. At first glance, the data looked ordinary. Safe, stable, profitable. But Daniel had learned something in 20 years of banking. Averages hide stories. He zoomed in on branch 14. Approval rate. Overall 62% approval rate. Minority-owned businesses 31%. His jaw tightened. He pressed the intercom. Send Ava Collins in. Ava arrived clutching a tablet, nerves visible in the way she held her shoulders. She was 24, sharp-eyed, and 2 weeks into her compliance internship. You wanted to see me, Mr. Reed. Close the door. She did. Daniel rotated the monitor toward her. You flagged 3 applications yesterday. Yes, sir. Why? Ava swallowed. They were coded elevated risk, subjective review. That designation bypasses the standard scoring matrix. And that's unusual. It's supposed to be rare. Daniel leaned back. How rare? She hesitated, then tapped her tablet. In most branches. 5% of denials. In branch 14, 23%. He let out a slow breath. And who authorizes subjective review? The branch manager. Thomas Whitmore. Yes, sir. Daniel nodded slowly. Tell me about Monica Harris. Eva opened the file. 10-year business history. No defaults. Credit score 792. Year-over-year growth. Solid contracts. And yet, denied under subjective risk. No numerical justification entered. Daniel's eyes hardened. Was there a written explanation? Standard template language. Portfolio alignment concerns. That's not a reason. No, sir. Silence stretched between them. Eva shifted. Mr. Reed, there's something else. Go on. In the past 18 months, Branch 14 approved 2 expansion loans for catering companies. Daniel looked up. And both owned by white male applicants. Lower credit scores. Shorter operating histories. The room felt smaller. Daniel stood and walked to the window overlooking downtown Chicago. Traffic crawled beneath him. Somewhere in that city, Monica Harris was probably recalculating payroll. Do you think this is intentional? He asked quietly. Eva hesitated carefully. I think it's consistent. He turned back toward her. That's not what I asked. She met his eyes. Bias doesn't always look intentional, sir. Sometimes it looks comfortable. The word lingered. Daniel nodded once. I want a full audit of Branch 14. Quietly. Ava's eyes widened. Quietly. No alerts. No internal memos yet. Pull 5 years of approval data. Break it down by race, gender, industry, and risk override frequency. Yes, sir. And Ava. He paused at the door. Document everything. Across the city, Monica sat at her kitchen office desk staring at an email from her produce supplier. Payment terms will revert to 15 days pending confirmation of expansion funding. She rubbed her temples. Marcus paced behind her. This is ridiculous, he said. Your numbers are stronger than half the restaurants downtown. It's not about numbers, she replied quietly. Then what is it about? Monica didn't answer. Her phone buzzed again, this time from Renee Lawson. I reviewed the denial letter, Renee said without greeting. It's vague on purpose. Legal vague. Strategic vague. Monica leaned back in her chair. Meaning they're protecting themselves. They didn't cite your debt ratio because it's good. They didn't cite cash flow because it's strong. They used portfolio fit. That's subjective. Can we challenge it? We can request a reconsideration. Demand transparency. But unless there's evidence of discrimination, they'll bury it. Monica stared at the wall where framed photos of catered events hung. Weddings, corporate galas, fundraisers. I'm tired of having to prove I belong in rooms I built, she said softly. Renee's voice gentled. Then don't prove it. Document it. Back at Sterling National, Thomas Whitmore adjusted his tie as he stepped into a weekly manager's call. Quarterly numbers look solid, he said confidently. We're maintaining prudent lending discipline. One regional director asked, Any risk anomalies? Whitmore smiled smoothly. We prioritize stability. No surprises. His assistant slipped a note onto his desk. Compliance requesting 5-year lending data. Whitmore's smile faltered for half a second. Excuse me, he said lightly into the speaker. Minor administrative request. He muted the call and leaned toward his assistant. Who authorized compliance to pull my branch data? Corporate office, sir. Which executive? She hesitated. CEO level. Whitmore's expression cooled. Interesting, he murmured. That evening, Daniel Reed sat alone reviewing preliminary breakdowns Ava had compiled in record time. Charts formed patterns like scars. In branch 14, subjective overrides disproportionately applied to Black and Latino applicants. Approval ratios diverged sharply from national averages. Reconsideration requests from minority applicants rarely overturned. Daniel tapped his pen against the desk. He remembered his father's hardware store loan being denied 30 years ago. No explanation given. He had told himself the industry had evolved. "Have we?" he muttered. His phone buzzed. "Board chairman. Hearing rumors you're digging into branch performance." Daniel typed back. "Ensuring consistency." The reply came instantly. "Be careful not to create problems where none exist." Daniel stared at the message. Problems don't appear because you look at them, he thought. They appear because they're there. He opened Monica Harris's file again. He clicked View Comparative Approvals. 2 catering businesses. Similar revenue. Proved. He leaned back slowly. "Not a risk," he said under his breath. "A pattern." And for the first time since becoming CEO, Daniel Reed realized the danger to Sterling National wasn't bad loans. It was the culture approving them and denying others. The kitchen was louder than usual. Metal trays clanged. Ovens hummed. Orders were shouted across stainless steel counters. But beneath the noise, tension coiled tight as wire. Monica stood at the prep table, slicing herbs with mechanical precision. "Boss," Jamal said carefully, "is the expansion happening or not?" She didn't look up. "We're still exploring options." "That's not what vendors are saying." The knife paused mid-chop. Marcus stepped in quickly. "Suppliers gossip. Doesn't mean anything." "It means they're nervous," Jamal replied. "And when they're nervous, prices go up." Monica set the knife down. "Everyone take 5, she said calmly. The staff exchanged glances but obeyed. When the room cleared, Marcus folded his arms. "You can't shield them forever." "I'm not shielding them. You're absorbing it." She exhaled sharply. "If the loan doesn't come through, we delay expansion. That's it. And payroll." Her silence answered. Marcus ran a hand over his face. "You built this from nothing. They can't just decide you're high risk, because some guy has a feeling." "It wasn't just a feeling," she said quietly. "It was comfort." "What?" "He was comfortable denying me." Marcus stared at her. "You think it's race. I know it's race." That afternoon, Monica sat across from Renee Lawson in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe. Renee slid a printed packet across the table. "I filed a formal request for reconsideration. They have 30 days to respond." 30 days. Monica repeated. "My lease option expires in 20. "I know." Monica rubbed her forehead. "What happens if they stall?" "They probably will. And then? Then we escalate." "To what?" Renee met her eyes. "Regulatory complaint. Possibly discrimination review." Monica leaned back slowly. "You think we can prove it?" Renee hesitated. "Proving intent is hard. Proving disparity is easier." "Disparity doesn't pay my employees." "No," Renee said gently. "But it forces accountability." Monica stared through the cafe window at people walking briskly past. No one looked worried about proving they deserved capital. "I'm tired of fighting for air," she said. Renee's voice softened. "Then let's make it expensive for them to hold their breath." Inside Sterling National, Thomas Whitmore stood in his office with the door closed. His assistant waited uneasily. "Compliance wants comparative files on 3 denied applicants," she said. Whitmore's jaw tightened. "On what grounds?" "Internal review." He paced once across the room. "Pull the files," he said finally. "But make sure everything is complete." "Complete." "Add detailed risk narratives. Emphasize volatility. Cash flow uncertainty." They didn't note those at the time. Whitmore stopped walking. "Are you questioning my judgment?" "No, sir." "Good." He returned to his desk and opened Monica Harris's file. He read her revenue projections again. Strong. Confident. Growing. He clicked into the internal notes section and typed, Expansion aggressive relative to market saturation. Liquidity vulnerable to contract fluctuation. He paused, then added. Subject exhibits overconfidence regarding scalability. He leaned back satisfied. Upstairs, Ava Collins frowned at her monitor. Mr. Reed, she said, stepping into the CEO's office. New notes were added to Harris's file. Daniel looked up sharply. When? 2 hours ago. He held out his hand. Show me. Ava handed him the tablet. Daniel scanned the text slowly. These weren't part of the original denial. No, sir. And they conveniently justify it. Yes, sir. Daniel's jaw hardened. Document the timestamp. Already did. Good. He stood abruptly. Set a meeting with Whitmore tomorrow morning. That evening, Monica drove home in silence. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Hello, Ms. Harris. The voice was female, young, nervous. My name is Ava Collins. I work in compliance at Sterling National. Monica pulled the car over. Yes. I can't say much. But your file is under review. Review for what? For irregularities. Monica's pulse quickened. What kind of irregularities? Risk overrides. Subjective coding. Disparities. Monica closed her eyes briefly. So I wasn't imagining it. No, ma'am. Why are you telling me this? Because my job is to ensure fairness, Ava said quietly. And I'm not sure that happened. Monica swallowed. What happens now? I don't know, Ava admitted. But someone upstairs is paying attention. Who? I can't say. The line went silent for a moment. Thank you, Monica said finally. Don't thank me yet. The call ended. Marcus looked over from the passenger seat. Who was that? Someone inside. Inside the bank. Yes. And? Monica stared at the darkening sky above the city skyline. And maybe, she said slowly, this isn't just about a loan anymore. The next morning, Daniel Reed sat across from Thomas Whitmore in a conference room stripped of warmth. Whitmore smiled professionally. To what do I owe the honor? Daniel slid a printed chart across the table. Explain branch 14's override frequency. Whitmore glanced down briefly. Discretion ensures prudent lending. At nearly 5 times the corporate average. Whitmore's smile tightened. Different markets require different instincts. Instinct isn't a metric. It's experience. Daniel leaned forward. Why were narrative justifications added to Monica Harris's file yesterday? Whitmore blinked once. Clarification. After the fact. Whitmore's expression cooled. Are you suggesting misconduct? I'm asking for transparency. Whitmore's voice dropped slightly. Be careful, Daniel. These kinds of accusations can damage morale. Bias damages more than morale. The air in the room shifted. Whitmore folded his hands. Are we truly having this conversation? Yes, Daniel said evenly. We are. Whitmore held his gaze. Then I suggest, he replied slowly, you consider the reputational risk of digging too deep. Daniel didn't flinch. Reputation, he said quietly, is built on what we tolerate. Silence settled between them like a verdict waiting to be spoken. And somewhere in that silence, the cost of a single denied loan began to multiply. The community center smelled like burnt coffee and folding chairs. A banner stretched across the wall. Chicago Small Business Growth Forum. Monica almost hadn't come. But Renee insisted. You need to hear you're not alone, she'd said. Now Monica sat in the third row, fingers laced together, listening as a Latino bookstore owner stood at the microphone. They told me my neighborhood was economically fragile, he said. But 3 months later, they financed a luxury pet spa 2 blocks away. Soft laughter, bitter knowing, rippled through the room. A black woman in a tailored suit spoke next. My application was incomplete 3 times. Same paperwork. Same numbers. Suddenly it was fine when my white partner signed as majority owner. The moderator nodded grimly. Patterns matter. Monica felt her pulse in her throat. When the mic reached her, she hesitated. Monica Harris, she said finally. Catering business. 10 years. A few heads turned. Someone whispered recognition. I was denied an expansion loan last week, she continued. Strong credit. Strong revenue. The reason given was portfolio alignment. A murmur spread. What does that even mean? Someone called out. It means, Monica said carefully. They didn't have to explain. The room went quiet. She swallowed. I don't need a favor, she said. I need fairness. Applause broke out, not loud but steady. For the first time since the denial, she didn't feel small. Across town, Daniel Reed stood before Sterling National's executive board. The room was larger than it needed to be. Polished oak table. Floor-to-ceiling windows. 10 people who controlled billions. Chairman Arthur Bell steepled his fingers. You requested an emergency session, Bell said. I assume this concerns Branch 14. It does, Daniel replied evenly. He tapped a remote. Slides illuminated the screen. Approval rates, override percentages, demographic comparisons. Branch 14's minority approval rate is half the corporate average, Daniel said. Override usage is quadruple. A board member frowned. Correlation isn't causation. It warrants investigation. Bell's voice cooled. Investigation implies wrongdoing. Daniel met his gaze. Patterns imply systemic risk. Financial risk? Another member asked. Reputational, Daniel answered. The room shifted. Are we facing litigation? Alas, not yet. Then why escalate? Daniel paused. Because if we don't address this internally, he said, someone else will address it publicly. A murmur of discomfort. Bell leaned back. Thomas Whitmore has led Branch 14 for 12 years. Profitable years. Profitability does not equal fairness. Fairness, Bell said mildly, is subjective. Daniel's jaw tightened. Data isn't. Silence thickened. Bell folded his hands. What are you proposing? Independent audit. Temporary suspension of override authority. Transparent criteria publication. The words landed like stones. That level of scrutiny could damage investor confidence, a board member warned. Daniel held steady. Selective scrutiny damages communities. Bell studied him. You're new in this seat, he said quietly. Be careful not to mistake reform for recklessness. Daniel didn't blink. I'm careful, he replied. That's why I'm acting now. Meanwhile, inside Branch 14, tension simmered. Whitmore stood in the break room doorway. Compliance interviews will begin tomorrow, he announced smoothly. Routine review. An analyst raised a hand. Should we be concerned? Only if you've been careless, Whitmore replied lightly. A few uneasy glances passed between staff. Afterward, Junior Loan Officer Karen Patel lingered near the coffee machine. She approached Whitmore cautiously. Sir, about the Harris file. Yes. I remember running her numbers. They qualified. Whitmore's expression didn't change. Numbers inform decisions, he said. They don't dictate them. But the override. Karen, he interrupted softly. Our job is to protect the bank. And the applicants. Our responsibility is to shareholders. Karen hesitated. What if those conflict? Whitmore smiled thinly. They don't. That evening, Monica's phone buzzed with a news alert. National report highlights racial lending disparities across major banks. She clicked the article. The statistics mirrored her experience. Minority entrepreneurs denied at disproportionate rates. Subjective assessments cited frequently. Marcus leaned over her shoulder. It's not just you. I know, she said quietly. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Hello, Ms. Harris. The voice was male this time. Measured. Daniel Reed, CEO of Sterling National. Monica froze. Yes. I'd like to meet. Silence stretched. About what? She asked carefully. Your application. 1,000 thoughts collided in her mind. Is this another denial? She asked. No, Daniel said evenly. It's a conversation. She hesitated. Why now? Because, he replied. The data suggests we may have failed you. The words stunned her. Where? She asked slowly. My office. Tomorrow morning. Monica glanced at Marcus, who was watching her closely. I'll be there, she said. After the call ended, Marcus raised his eyebrows. The CEO. Yes. That's not small. No, Monica murmured. It wasn't small. It was the kind of crack that could either seal shut or split something wide open. And tomorrow she would find out which. Daniel Reed's office felt different in the morning light. Less like a fortress, more like a stage. Monica noticed that immediately. The elevator ride up had been silent. The receptionist upstairs did not smile the same way the one downstairs had. This one looked curious. Daniel stood when she entered. Ms. Harris, he said. Thank you for coming. She shook his hand firmly. I didn't expect to. That's fair. He gestured to a chair near the window rather than across his desk. Subtle difference. No barrier. I reviewed your file personally, Daniel began. And? She asked. And I believe your application deserved a standard risk evaluation. It did not receive one. Monica studied him carefully. That's a polished way of saying what? That the override applied to your case raises concerns. Concerns about bias. Daniel didn't flinch. Concerns about inconsistency. She leaned back slightly. You can say the word. Bias, he said evenly. The word hung between them, heavy, undeniable. Monica folded her hands in her lap to steady them. So what happens now? We've initiated an internal audit. Internal, she repeated. For now. For now. Her voice sharpened. With respect, Mr. Reed, internal processes are how this started. Daniel nodded slowly. That's why transparency matters. He slid a printed chart across the small table. These are approval rates for branch 14. She scanned the numbers. Her stomach tightened. 31%, she whispered. That's not a fluke. No, Daniel agreed. It's not. Silence stretched. I built my company from scratch, Monica said quietly. No inheritance. No safety net. I've hired from my own neighborhood. Pay on time. I file everything correctly. I know, Daniel replied. And still I'm elevated risk. He met her gaze. That designation should not have been used without numerical justification. But it was. Yes. Monica stood and walked toward the window, Chicago's skyline sprawling beneath her. Do you know what it feels like, she said softly, to sit across from someone who's already decided you don't belong? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Yes, he said finally. I do. He turned surprised. My father ran a hardware store, he continued. Loan denied in 1989. No explanation. Just portfolio alignment. Monica studied him. And you work here now. I do. Does that make it better? No, he said quietly. It makes it personal. A knock interrupted them. Eva stepped inside, pale. Sir, she said carefully. Channel 7 just aired a segment. Daniel frowned. On what? Eva swallowed. On us. The newsroom lights were harsh. A graphic filled the screen. Sterling National under scrutiny for lending disparities. An investigative journalist, Carla Benson, spoke directly into the camera. New data obtained by our team reveals that Sterling National's Branch 14 denies minority-owned businesses at nearly double the rate of white-owned counterparts. One applicant, Monica Harris, with a 10-year profitable history, was denied an expansion loan under what internal documents describe as subjective risk. Monica felt the air leave her lungs. "That's my name," she whispered. The screen shifted to anonymized charts, the same ones Daniel had shown her. "Sources inside the bank," Carla continued, "suggest override authority may have been used disproportionately." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Who leaked this?" he asked quietly. Ava's eyes flickered downward. Monica looked between them. "You knew this was coming?" she asked. "No," Daniel said firmly. "I did not." The segment cut to a clip of Thomas Whitmore being approached outside the branch. "Mr. Whitmore, how do you respond to allegations of discriminatory lending?" Whitmore adjusted his coat smoothly. "Our branch follows strict regulatory guidelines," he said calmly. "Individual cases are evaluated holistically. We reject the implication of bias. Specifically, Ms. Harris, I cannot comment on private client matters." The clip ended. Silence filled Daniel's office. Monica crossed her arms. "So now what?" Daniel looked at the television screen still frozen on Whitmore's composed face. "Now," he said slowly, "this is no longer internal." Across town, Whitmore turned off his office TV sharply. His assistant hovered in the doorway. "Sir, corporate communications is requesting a statement." Whitmore's expression hardened. "Prepare one," he said. "Emphasize compliance and merit-based evaluation." "Yes, sir." "And contact legal." He loosened his tie slightly. "This is a misunderstanding," he muttered to himself. But even as he said it, he knew the ground had shifted. Back in Daniel's office, Monica's phone buzzed relentlessly. Texts, emails, missed calls, supportive messages, angry messages, media inquiries. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "I know. My employees will see it. They deserve to." She looked at him sharply. "Not like this." He softened his tone. "Exposure is uncomfortable. But silence is worse." Monica exhaled slowly. "Are you going to stand behind a press release?" she asked. "Or are you going to stand behind reform?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "I'm calling a press conference." Ava's eyes widened slightly. "Today?" "Yes." Monica studied him carefully. "If you're going to say it," she said quietly, "say it clearly." He met her gaze. "I will." That afternoon, cameras flashed in the Sterling National lobby. Daniel Reed stepped to the podium. Behind him, the bank's logo gleamed. "We are aware of concerns raised regarding lending practices at Branch 14, he began. Whitmore stood off to the side, expression controlled. "An independent audit has been commissioned," Daniel continued. "Effective immediately, subjective override authority at Branch 14 is suspended." A murmur rippled through reporters. "We are committed to transparent, equitable lending," Daniel said firmly. "If disparities are confirmed, corrective action will follow." A reporter called out, "Including termination?" Daniel paused. "Including accountability," he replied. Whitmore's jaw tightened. Across the crowd, Monica watched silently. This wasn't victory. It was ignition. And once something caught fire in public, it was very hard to contain. The Federal building felt colder than the bank ever had. Monica sat at the long oak table, hands folded tightly in front of her. A small placard read, "Monica Harris, business owner." Across the room, Thomas Whitmore adjusted his cufflinks. Between them sat three officials from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. Neutral expressions, legal pads, no visible emotion. Daniel Reed sat one seat behind Monica, not speaking but present. The lead examiner, Patricia Vaughn, cleared her throat. "This hearing concerns potential disparities in lending practices at Sterling National, Branch 14. Ms. Harris, you may begin." Monica swallowed. "When I applied for my expansion loan," she said steadily, "my financials exceeded the bank's own stated requirements." Patricia nodded. "And the stated reason for denial?" "Portfolio alignment." A faint murmur moved through observers seated behind them. Did the branch provide quantitative justification? Patricia asked. No. Were you offered alternative financing? No. Were similarly situated applicants approved? Monica's eyes flicked briefly toward Whitmore. Yes. Patricia turned to Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore. Whitmore leaned forward, voice smooth. Every applicant is evaluated holistically. Risk isn't purely numerical. Patricia's pen paused. Define holistic. Experience-based judgment. Market intuition. Monica felt heat rise in her chest. Intuition doesn't appear on balance sheets, she said. Patricia raised a hand gently. Ms. Harris, please allow him to answer. Whitmore offered a tight smile. Banking requires discernment, he said. Certain expansion models fail despite promising data. Patricia tilted her head slightly. Can you identify a numerical weakness in Ms. Harris's file? Whitmore hesitated, just a fraction too long. The industry is competitive. That wasn't my question. A ripple of tension moved through the room. Whitmore adjusted in his seat. Liquidity exposure could increase under stress. Patricia flipped through a binder. Her liquidity ratio was 2.4. Corporate minimum is 1.5. Silence. Whitmore cleared his throat. Metrics don't capture everything. Patricia's gaze sharpened. Do they capture race? The room stilled. Whitmore stiffened. Absolutely not. Patricia leaned back slightly. Then why does your branch override minority applications at quadruple the corporate average? He said nothing. Monica's pulse pounded in her ears. Patricia continued calmly. We reviewed 5 years of override data. 72% applied to Black or Latino applicants. Whitmore's composure began to crack. Correlation does not prove discrimination. No, Patricia agreed evenly. But patterns demand explanation. Daniel watched quietly, jaw tight. Monica leaned toward the microphone. When I asked for specificity, she said, voice steady but low, I was told specificity wasn't constructive. A soft murmur passed through the audience again. Patricia wrote something down. Mr. Whitmore, she said, why were narrative justifications added to Ms. Harris's file after compliance initiated review? Whitmore froze. They were clarifications. Time-stamped 48 hours after media inquiry. His silence stretched too long. Patricia closed her folder slowly. We will recess for review. In the hallway outside, reporters clustered near the doors. Marcus stood beside Monica. You were incredible, he whispered. She exhaled shakily. I felt like I was back in that office. Daniel approached cautiously. You did exactly what needed to be done, he said. Monica looked at him. Why does it take a federal hearing for someone to admit what was obvious? She asked quietly. Daniel didn't have an easy answer. Because institutions protect themselves first, he said finally. Unless forced otherwise. She studied him. And are you protecting yourself? No, he said firmly. I'm protecting what this bank should be. Before she could respond, the doors reopened. Patricia Vaughn stepped out. We have preliminary findings, she announced. Everyone turned. Branch 14's override usage demonstrates statistically significant racial disparity inconsistent with corporate policy. A low wave of murmurs. Further, she continued, post hoc narrative additions to Ms. Harris's file violate procedural integrity standards. Whitmore's face drained of color. Patricia's voice remained measured. We are recommending immediate personnel review and remedial compliance oversight. A reporter called out, Does that mean termination? Patricia paused. That determination lies with Sterling National's executive leadership. All eyes shifted to Daniel. He stepped forward. Sterling National accepts the findings, he said clearly. Effective immediately, Thomas Whitmore is relieved of his position pending final review. Gasps rippled through the hallway. Whitmore stared at him. You're making a mistake, he hissed quietly. Daniel met his gaze. No, he replied. We already did. Security approached discreetly. Whitmore straightened his tie one last time. This will follow you, he muttered to Daniel. Daniel's expression didn't change. It already has, he said. Whitmore walked away without looking back. Monica stood frozen. It wasn't triumph she felt. It was something heavier. Relief mixed with exhaustion. Validation wrapped in grief. Daniel turned to her. The board will vote on additional reforms tomorrow, he said. And my loan? She asked softly. He held her gaze. It will be re-evaluated under transparent criteria. She nodded slowly. Justice, she realized, didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like air returning to lungs that had been compressed for too long. But air, she knew, could still be taken away. And tomorrow would decide whether this moment was reform or merely damage control. The boardroom was quieter than usual. Not tense, not argumentative. Quiet in the way rooms become when consequences are unavoidable. Daniel Reed stood at the head of the table, hands resting flat against polished wood. Sunlight cut through the windows in sharp lines, illuminating the faces of the 10 people who could either shield the institution or finally change it. Arthur Bell spoke first. You moved quickly, he said evenly. I moved appropriately, Daniel replied. You terminated a 12-year branch manager within hours of preliminary findings. Pending final review. Bell studied him. The press is framing this as an admission of guilt. It is an admission of responsibility. A board member shifted uncomfortably. Responsibility implies liability. Daniel didn't blink. Then we should examine why liability exists. Silence. He tapped the remote. Slide appeared. Proposed reforms. Immediate implementation. Elimination of unilateral subjective override authority. Third-party auditing of all branch lending decisions. Public reporting of demographic lending data. Mandatory bias training and certification. Restitution review of flagged denials. Murmurs rippled around the table. Public reporting. One member repeated. That exposes us. Daniel nodded. Yes. That could tank stock value. So could federal sanctions. Bell's voice lowered. You're gambling with the bank's stability. Daniel leaned forward slightly. No, he said. I'm gambling on its integrity. The word integrity lingered. Bell's jaw tightened. And if shareholders revolt? They won't, Daniel replied. Because transparency restores trust. A long pause stretched. Finally, Bell exhaled slowly. Call the vote. Hands lifted one by one. Reluctant. Measured. But rising. 8 in favor. 2 opposed. Bell lowered his hand last. Motion passes. Daniel allowed himself one small breath. Across town, Monica sat at her kitchen desk when her phone rang. Ms. Harris. Daniel's voice came through. The board has approved sweeping reforms. She closed her eyes briefly. Reforms? Yes. And your application has been re-evaluated under standardized metrics. And you qualify. The room felt suddenly too small. You're approving it, she asked quietly. Yes. How do I know this isn't optics? You don't, he answered honestly. But the numbers support it. They always did. Monica leaned back in her chair. How many others were denied like me? We're reviewing every flagged case. And will they get calls too? Yes. She let out a slow breath. This doesn't erase what happened, she said. I know. Public humiliation isn't undone by paperwork. No. Silence lingered. Then why does this feel? She hesitated, searching for the word. Incomplete. Daniel offered. Yes. Because accountability doesn't restore time, he said. It restores process. Monica stared at the framed photos on her wall. My employees were scared, she said quietly. My suppliers doubted me. My reputation wavered. I can't repair that, Daniel replied. No, she said. You can't. Later that afternoon, Cameras once again filled the bank's lobby. But this time the tone was different. Daniel stepped to the podium. Sterling National has completed an initial review of Branch 14's practices, he began. The findings confirm procedural failures and unacceptable disparities. Reporters scribbled rapidly. Effective immediately, he continued. We are implementing structural reforms to ensure transparent, equitable lending nationwide. A reporter called out, "Is this an admission of systemic racism?" Daniel paused. "It is an acknowledgement," he said carefully, "that systems can produce inequitable outcomes even without explicit intent. Will former manager Thomas Whitmore face legal action? That determination will follow regulatory review." Another reporter raised a hand. "What about Monica Harris?" Daniel glanced briefly toward the side of the room, where Monica stood quietly with Marcus. "Ms. Harris's loan has been approved under standardized evaluation," he said clearly. Cameras shifted toward her. She hadn't expected to be pulled forward. But suddenly microphones hovered inches from her face. "Ms. Harris, do you feel vindicated?" She steadied herself. "I feel heard," she said. "That's different. Do you accept the bank's apology?" She looked at Daniel for a fraction of a second before answering. "Accountability matters," she said. "But so does culture. I'll believe in change when it becomes ordinary." The statement landed harder than applause ever could. That evening, in a quiet corner office stripped of his nameplate, Thomas Whitmore packed the last of his belongings into a cardboard box. His assistant stood awkwardly near the doorway. "They're making you the example," he muttered. "No one forced the override data," she said gently. He shot her a sharp look. "I did what managers are hired to do. Protect the institution." "At what cost?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer. As he walked past the lobby for the final time, reporters shouted questions. "Do you deny discrimination?" Whitmore stopped briefly. "I deny prejudice," he said coldly. "I made business decisions." "Then why were minorities disproportionately denied?" He tightened his grip on the box. "Because business isn't charity." Gasps rippled through the crowd. He walked away without another word. The comment would replay on every news channel by nightfall. And whatever doubt remained about systemic bias would evaporate with it. Monica stood alone later on the rooftop of her building, the city lights shimmering below. Marcus joined her quietly. "You won," he said softly. She shook her head. "No," she replied. "I survived." He leaned against the railing beside her. "That's winning sometimes." She stared at the skyline, at banks and offices and glass towers that once felt untouchable. "Change shouldn't require humiliation," she said quietly. "No," Marcus agreed. "But it required courage," he added. Monica exhaled slowly. The loan approval email sat unopened in her inbox. Victory felt different than she imagined. Less explosive. More deliberate. Justice hadn't roared. It had adjusted the scales slightly. And tomorrow, she would decide whether that adjustment was enough to build on, or simply another promise waiting to be tested. The wire transfer hit Monica's business account at 9:17 a.m. She stared at the screen longer than necessary. Sterling National, commercial loan disbursement. $250,000. Proved. Funded. Real. Marcus leaned over her shoulder. "Well, it's there," she said quietly. He let out a breath. "You did it." Monica didn't smile right away. "Open the champagne later," she murmured. "We have work to do." Construction on the second kitchen began 2 weeks later. The new space smelled like fresh drywall and possibility. Contractors moved in and out. Stainless steel appliances were delivered in crates. Her staff walked through the unfinished space carefully. "This is ours?" Jamal asked. "It is," Monica replied. "You almost lost this." She nodded. "I know." The words hung heavier than the scent of sawdust. One of her newer employees, Tasha, spoke softly. "My cousin applied for a small business loan last year. Kryptonite. She just gave up. Monica turned toward her. Tell her not to. Tasha hesitated. Not everyone has a CEO calling. Monica didn't respond immediately. That's why the rules have to change, she said finally. Not just the outcome. Sterling National's quarterly shareholder meeting was tense. Daniel stood before a wall of investors, graphs projected behind him. Short-term volatility is expected, he said evenly. But long-term institutional trust strengthens shareholder value. An investor stood abruptly. You fired a high-performing manager and exposed internal data. Our stock dipped 3%. Daniel nodded. And federal sanctions would have cost more. Murmurs followed. Transparency is not a liability, he continued. It is a safeguard. A woman near the front raised her hand. How do we ensure this doesn't happen again? By removing discretion without accountability, Daniel replied. And by measuring what we once ignored. The room quieted. Reform, he knew, was less dramatic than scandal. But harder. Across town, Thomas Whitmore sat in his living room watching the evening news. His name crawled across the screen beneath the words. Former manager at center of lending controversy. Clips replayed his statement. Business isn't charity. He muted the television. His phone buzzed, not with support. Recruiters stopped returning calls. Colleagues distanced themselves. His professional circle, once expansive, shrank overnight. He told himself he was misunderstood. But doubt crept in during the silence. Had he mistaken bias for instinct? He pushed the thought away. Monica received letters. Some handwritten. Some anonymous. One read. You only got approved because you played the race card. She folded it carefully and set it aside. Another read. Thank you for standing up. My daughter saw you on TV and said she wants to start her own business someday. That one she kept on her desk. Late one evening, she sat alone in the unfinished kitchen. The hum of the city filtered faintly through the walls. Her phone buzzed. Daniel. Construction going well? He asked. Yes, was. I wanted to inform you, he said. The audit identified 14 additional cases requiring review. Monica closed her eyes briefly. And 7 approvals overturned. 3 under reconsideration. 4 escalated. She exhaled slowly. That's something. It's not enough, he admitted. No, she agreed. Silence settled. Why did you really do it? She asked. Do what? Push this. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because if institutions only change when forced publicly, he said quietly, they never truly change. She considered that. And you think this will stick? I intend for it to. Monica looked around the half-built kitchen. I hope so, she said softly. Because I don't want the next woman to have to go through this. Opening day for the expanded facility arrived under bright autumn sunlight. A ribbon stretched across the entrance. Community members gathered. Employees beamed. Reporters hovered but kept their distance this time. Monica stepped to the small podium Marcus had insisted on setting up. I built this company one contract at a time, she said. And I fought for this expansion not because I'm exceptional, but because fairness shouldn't be exceptional. Applause rose warmly. She cut the ribbon. Cameras flashed. But this time it didn't feel like exposure. Felt like ownership. Later that night, after everyone left, Monica walked through the new kitchen alone. The stainless steel counters gleamed. Ovens hummed softly. She ran her hand along one countertop. The victory was real. But so was the memory of sitting in that glass office, being told she was a risk. Trauma doesn't disappear when paperwork changes. It lingers. It reshapes how you enter rooms. Her phone buzzed again, a news notification. Sterling National announces nationwide lending transparency portal. She allowed herself a small smile. Change wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean. But it had weight now. And weight meant permanence. Monica turned off the lights and stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city skyline looked the same. But something beneath it had shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough to remind her. Systems are built by people. And they can be rebuilt too. Winter arrived quietly over Chicago, dusting the streets with frost and urgency. Inside Sterling National, Branch 14's offices were eerily silent. The hum of computers filled the void left by Thomas Whitmore. Employees moved cautiously, unsure which footsteps to trust, which glances were genuine, and which were whispers of survival. Whitmore's departure left a vacancy no one wanted to fill immediately. The interim manager, a young compliance officer named Marcus Delaney, implemented the new audit protocols strictly. Every subjective override was flagged. Every exception scrutinized. Every approval had to be justified with numbers, documentation, and time-stamped narratives. At a conference table, Daniel Reed reviewed the first wave of post-reform files with Ava Collins. "Initial results are promising," Ava said. "Minority approvals are up 20%. Overrides are nearly eliminated." Daniel nodded. "It's a start. But real reform isn't about numbers. It's about culture." Ava hesitated. "Do you think the board understands that?" "They understand the optics," Daniel replied. "Culture is harder to legislate." Meanwhile, Monica Harris had moved back into the rhythm of her business. The second kitchen thrived. Contracts multiplied. Employees smiled freely, no longer tense at whispered uncertainties about whether the next payroll would clear. Yet she could not ignore the cost. One evening, she received an email from a former employee who had quit after Branch 14's initial denial affected her cousin's small bakery loan. "I almost gave up. Seeing your story gave me the courage to reapply." "Thank you." Monica leaned back in her chair, fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. The message was small, but it rippled wider than the headlines ever could. She remembered the night she'd sat across from Daniel Reed in his office, the cold glass walls, the weight of invisible decisions that had threatened her livelihood. People suffer while systems protect themselves, she thought. But someone has to push back. Back at Sterling National, Whitmore attempted to rebuild his life. Interviews went poorly. Former colleagues avoided him. Rumors circulated. The Branch 14 scandal was now synonymous with his name. He sat in his apartment, flipping through news clips of Daniel Reed's press conferences. Every phrase was carefully measured, the bank's commitment to equity emphasized, Whitmore's past decisions dissected in financial and human terms alike. The words "systemic bias" echoed against the walls. He dialed a familiar number, his lawyer. "They're destroying me," he said, voice low. "All my years, erased by a few numbers and one public statement." "Thomas," the lawyer replied cautiously, "it's not personal. The numbers don't lie." "Numbers," Whitmore scoffed. "Those numbers were in my favor. I did my job. But the audit shows disproportionate denials." Whitmore leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "Disproportionate, yes. Intentional, well, it doesn't matter. Perception becomes reality." Meanwhile, Monica attended a small community panel hosted at a local library. She was asked to speak about her experience. "Many think equity is automatic," she said, eyes scanning the room filled with local entrepreneurs. "It's not. It requires vigilance. It requires accountability. And sometimes it requires risk, standing up even when the system seems unbeatable." A young man raised his hand. "What about the people who still can't access loans?" "They need visibility," Monica answered firmly. "They need audits, transparency, and advocates. And they need to know that speaking up isn't failure, it's courage." A wave of nods spread across the audience. She thought about the messages she had received, the small businesses that had applied and been denied, the faces of employees she could now pay without fear. Change, she realized, was iterative. Low, hard, but tangible. Back in Daniel Reed's office, he compiled the final audit report for the board. The numbers were sobering. Branch 14 had denied nearly 75 minority-owned business loans over 5 years under subjective overrides. 14 of those denials were cases similar to Monica Harris. He sighed. "Ava," he said, "these numbers tell a story. But they don't tell everything." "They tell enough," Ava replied. "And the board will act." "Numbers are evidence," Daniel said quietly. "But culture is accountability. Without both, it's performative." He clicked send and leaned back, eyes closing for a brief moment. He thought of Monica Harris, of the courage it took to walk into his office and demand to be heard. The scales had begun to tilt. But he knew the fight against complacency would never end. At Monica's headquarters, she unlocked the office door late one night. The stainless steel counters gleamed under dim lights. The city below buzzed with life, indifferent but ever-present. She sat at her desk, reflecting on the journey. The denial, the media attention, the federal hearing, the reforms. Her phone buzzed. Another message, another entrepreneur thanking her for her courage. She typed a brief reply. "Keep going. Don't let anyone decide your worth." And then she shut it off. She leaned back, letting herself breathe. The battle had left scars, but it had also left a path. Monica Harris had survived. And in surviving, she had begun to carve a road for others. The systems were far from perfect. The work was far from done. But the reckoning had begun. And for the first time, she felt the weight of hope settle comfortably across her shoulders. Spring in Chicago carried a different light. Soft, persistent, hinting at renewal. Monica Harris walked through the doors of her expanded catering headquarters, sunlight bouncing off polished counters and stainless steel appliances. The smell of fresh coffee and baked bread greeted her like a promise. She paused at the center of the kitchen, letting her gaze travel over the bustling staff. Orders shouted across the room, trays clanging, laughter threading through the hum of work. Each face bore confidence now, the tension of uncertainty replaced with pride. Marcus approached, carrying a stack of invoices. "Looks like everything is running smoothly." Monica nodded but didn't answer immediately. She thought of the long months behind her, the denial, the whispered excuses, the hearings, the media exposure, the humiliation, the fear, the small victories that had stacked, one on top of the other, until they became unshakable. A message buzzed on her phone. It was from Ava Collins. "Whitmore's appeal has been denied. Termination is now final. Public statement to follow." Monica allowed herself a small exhale. It wasn't joy exactly. It was acknowledgement. Justice measured, procedural, undeniable. The man who had tried to stifle her ambition, to weaponize the institution against her, would no longer wield that power. Across town, Thomas Whitmore faced the finality of his career unraveling. The public statement read, "Sterling National confirms the termination of Thomas Whitmore, former Branch 14 manager, following independent audit findings indicating consistent procedural violations and disparate treatment of minority-owned loan applications." The news outlets replayed his past quotes, each one undercutting his authority. Analysts dissected his statements. "Business isn't charity," now juxtaposed with audit results and testimony from Monica Harris. Former colleagues refused interviews. Recruiters stopped returning calls. His professional network, once expansive, evaporated. Whitmore sat alone in his apartment, staring at the newsfeed. For the first time, the instinct-driven man who had believed his actions were justified understood that intention did not erase consequence. Monica's phone buzzed again, this time from the comptroller's office. "Ms. Harris," the voice was professional but warm, "we're closing the review on the 14 additional cases. 7 approvals overturned, all retroactive. The bank will issue backdated loans and financial restitution where applicable." She pressed the phone to her chest. "Thank you. You helped set a precedent," the voice continued. "Your courage made the difference." Monica exhaled slowly. "I didn't do it for precedent. I did it because someone had to." Later that evening, she attended a community gathering celebrating local business success. The room was filled with familiar faces. Entrepreneurs whose applications had been denied, Employees from her kitchen, neighbors who had watched her story unfold in the media. A young woman approached her hesitantly. "Ms. Harris, I just wanted to say, thank you. You gave me hope." Monica smiled gently. "You have it in you already. You just need to believe it's valid." The crowd clapped softly. It was quieter than the newsroom flashes, the press conferences, or the federal hearings, but the warmth was real. Back at Sterling National, Daniel Reed convened a final meeting with the board. "The reforms are in place," he began, "and the audit confirms improved compliance and equity across all branches. Branch 14's override authority has been permanently removed. All flagged cases reviewed. Minority-owned applicants previously denied will be reconsidered." Arthur Bell leaned back, studying Daniel. "You pushed hard. The board resisted. Shareholders questioned you. But the institution is intact." Daniel shook his head. "More than intact. It's accountable." One board member, hesitant at first, finally spoke. "And Whitmore." Daniel's eyes were steady. "He's no longer with Sterling National. Accountability is not punitive, it is necessary. It ensures the system works as intended." The room remained quiet. Daniel allowed the weight of the moment to settle. Justice had not been spectacular. It had been procedural, thorough, and undeniable. Weeks later, Monica sat in her office at the head of her expanded kitchen, looking over contracts for the next quarter. Marcus leaned against the doorway. "You've changed the game for a lot of people." She shook her head. "I just survived it. But yes, maybe it means others won't have to fight blindfolded." Her phone buzzed, another email. A local bank offering partnerships. Favorable terms. Transparent processes. Monica smiled faintly. The victory wasn't over. The work wasn't done. But the path forward was now visible. She leaned back, letting the hum of the kitchen surround her. Later, alone on her rooftop, the city stretched below like a living grid of light and possibility. "Change," she whispered, "takes courage." Marcus joined her quietly. "And persistence." "Yes," she said. "And accountability. Without it, systems remain broken." The night air was crisp, carrying with it a promise of renewal. Monica thought of Whitmore, of Daniel, of the countless faces affected by Branch 14's practices. Justice, she realized, was rarely dramatic. It was methodical, persistent, and sometimes quiet. But when it landed fully. And Monica Harris had made sure it did. She closed her eyes, letting the weight of survival, truth, and small victories settle across her shoulders. The city below had not changed. But beneath its surface, something had shifted. Permanence had taken root. Systems could be rebuilt. People could be heard. Futures could be reclaimed. And Monica, she was ready to continue building hers.